Now, cast your minds back 15 years. In its first days, the coalition government launched a plan to axe vast swathes of arm's-length bodies to curb public spending, in what soon became known as the bonfire of the Quangos. This week, Labour started a bonfire of its own by scrapping NHS England, in a surprise move that seems to have divided the Conservative Party. Earlier, I spoke to their Shadow Education Secretary, Laura Trott. Laura Trott, the former Conservative Minister, Lord Bethell, reacted to the abolition of the NHS England by saying, "I wish we'd had the guts to do this." Do you agree that the Tories just funked it?
No, I don't. The reforms that we brought in I think it was 2013, were well-intentioned, but it's clear
the
they
Langley
haven't...
reforms,
yeah,
disastrous.
They haven't worked in the way that they were intended to. But obviously we had the pandemic. It would be not, I think, the best idea to do a top-down NHS reorganisation directly after a pandemic. But I do agree in principle with what Wes is putting forward. But I think people at home should be aware that this isn't a silver bullet. This system exists in Wales, where the waiting lists are the highest in the UK. The changes will also result in costs and disruption, and we'll need to see a very clear plan from the government for how that won't affect waiting lists further.
But you could have done it, couldn't you? You could have done some... I understand you couldn't have done it after the pandemic.
Exactly.
But you had, what, 8 years before then?
Yeah, but the reforms were just in and they were bedding. I think it was clear at that point...
you brought them in 2012, pandemic happened 2021.
2020. Yeah, exactly. But when they came in like 2013, I think. But it was just... What I'm saying is, yes, I agree with the principle. I think if we tried to do this after the pandemic, it would have been a disaster. So I think it's right to wait.
All right. We're coming up to spring statement. The Chancellor will make her wishes known when it comes to welfare benefits. You were both Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Pensions Minister. Will you support cuts in disability benefits?
I think on the specifics, I want to wait to see what the government brings forward. But I think it's really important to remember that at the election, Labour said we could save no money from welfare. There was no welfare bill on reform in the King's speech. They've lost so much time when it was obvious to everyone that this was a benefit system that needed to be brought back under control post the pandemic. We'd taken some steps, which have been scored by the OBR, which is the kind of fiscal regulator, but there was more to do, and we had a plan at the election to do so. Labour are coming to this too late, without a plan. They're clearly divided on it, and that is not what our welfare system needs.
You let 1 million extra people go on personal independent payments since the pandemic. You just let this thing run out of control.
Well, as I said, obviously the pandemic had an impact on the welfare system. I think everybody agrees with that.
No.
Everybody agrees that there were steps that needed to be taken to bring it back under control.
We're now up to nearly 3 million people.
Yes, we'd started that process.
Off.
Yes, we started that process before the election. It was in a number of our fiscal events, and they were bringing it down slowly. There were further we wanted the steps that we wanted to take. We set those out at the election. They were not taken up by the Labour Party. They're coming to this later on, as I said, divided and seemingly without any plan at all.
Is this your version of the Labour Party's view that the Tories created a problem that is an issue for everything they do? You are now saying that the pandemic seems to be responsible for all the things you failed to do.
No, I think, Trevor, it's pretty unambiguous that the pandemic had an impact across our society in many ways.
Yeah, but you could have done something about this.
We were doing things about it, and we have further steps to take. We set those out at the election. The Labour Party rejected those. They said there was no money to be saved from welfare at the election. I remember that very clearly. They're now coming to it chaotically, too late, without a plan, just ahead of their emergency budget. All
right, your leader said that she's not in any hurry to bring in policies. There's going to be policy groups set up and all of that. But let's just talk about a couple of issues in your area, education. Ian Duncan-Smith this morning has suggested that there should be job coaches in schools. Is that the kind of thing that you've got in mind for your policy groups?
Bringing education closer to the jobs market, I think, is very important. It's why we have questioned the bill that Labour have brought forward on abolishing the Institute for Apprenticeship and Technical Education, because it's actually taking employers out of the apprenticeship system, which we think is a very bad thing to do. That will be something that we will be looking to strengthen after the next election. But my main focus at the moment, Trevor, is on fighting Labour's disastrous schools bill, which has elements in there which will destroy the cross-party consensus on education that we've had over decades in this country.
Which is about academies and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, let me ask you about that. You've come out this morning to say that you want to ban mobile phones in schools.
Yes.
Same time, you're criticising the Education Secretary for curbing academy schools' freedoms, set their own targets and rules. Make up your mind. Are you in favour of academies being able to decide, for example, whether their pupils have mobile phones or not? Or are you in favour of top-down diktats that say no school must have mobile phones?
I'm in favour of consistent safeguarding across the board, and that academies are being
telling
allowed...
school leaders what to do, then?
No, it's safeguarding for children. We know that mobile phones are damaging. They impact children in the classroom, they impact behaviour, they impact educational attainment. It's something that parents and teachers across the country are looking for us to do something about. We've tried guidance. The guidance has not been effective. We know only 11% of schools have a proper mobile phone ban in place, and that's why we're taking these steps. But
how do you know better than the school leader in Swindon or in Gateshead what is right for his or her school?
This is something that teachers are asking for us to do.
Some teachers?
Well, and the education unions as well. This is something that is supported by the education unions, it is supported by teachers, it's supported by parents. We know it's an issue, we know it's a safeguarding issue.
So the Tories are now being guided by teaching unions?
No, I'm merely pointing out, you said that some teachers, I was pointing out there is support for this, Trevor.
Research by the National Association of Head Teachers showed that 8 out of 10 school leaders have been abused by parents in the last year. I think 1 in 10 head teachers say they faced actual violence. I understand your point about phones, but are you sure that it's the children and their phones that you should be targeting for improved behaviours? What about the parents?
I think that this is an extremely important issue. We've seen behaviour deteriorate in recent years, which is not helped by the government withdrawing funding and support for behaviour hubs across the country. It is something that we absolutely need to be focusing on as a country and as a government, which is why it is such a mistake for the Education Secretary to be pushing forward with a schools bill which will damage education standards in this country, while there's so much else which needs to be done.
But that's not really anything to do with parents, is it? I mean...
No, but what I'm saying is that there are things that we need to focus on in this country in schools that are really big problems at the moment. Right. Absenteeism, behaviour in schools, abuse of teachers, teacher recruitment, all those things need to be done and sorted. And if they brought forward proposals on that, we will be supportive of those.
Sorry, did you say abuse of teachers? Oh, abuse of teachers.
Yes, yes.
OK, let's just talk about politics, if we may. This is a politics show. If he applies to join the Conservative Party, would you welcome Mr Rupert Lowe?
Look, I'm not focused on any individual MP in Parliament. What I'm focused on is the number of people who are thinking about voting reform, who we need to convince to come back to the Conservative Party, who I recognise we lost their trust at the last election. They need to know that we've changed, and under Kemi, that process is underway.
One of the reasons they're not coming back to you, because the polls aren't moving, is that Labour looks like it's trying to do all the things that you said you'd do but didn't do, and the reform is promising all the things. Reforms promising all the things that you'd like
the economy,
to promise.
taking winter fuel payment away from pensioners, destroying education standards. This is not like a Hallocan Labour government. It's a disaster for this country.
No,
and we are the ones who are the main opposition. And we're having to deal with this supermajority in Parliament at the moment because reform enabled the Labour Party at the last election. That's why we're in the situation we are at the moment.
I'm simply saying nobody quite knows what the Tories are for right now.
Well, the Tories are for a system whereby we allow employers to employ people without exorbitant costs, which is what the Labour Party are putting on people at the moment. We are for making sure that pensioners can heat their homes in the winter. And we're for a brilliant education system, which is one that we have where teachers are free to teach what they want in the classrooms, where we have innovation backed up by rigorous inspection. That is all being undermined by the Labour Party.
Laura Trott, thank you very much for your time this morning.